Tommy Brown, Jr., affectionately known in his later years as Grandpa Brown, was born on a North Carolina farm in 1901. A mere 36 years earlier, the American Civil War concluded, legally ending chattel slavery and destroying the chains that bound his grandparents, who were both born enslaved. The former slaveholders nevertheless forced most blacks to continue working the land under exploitative sharecropping arrangements, the South's primary mode of agricultural production after slavery. Tommy Sr. and Luella, Grandpa Brown's parents, were sharecroppers who lived in Newton Grove, 45 miles from North Carolina's capital. With their 12 children, the couple worked the former slave master's land. As it had been in the antebellum era, the former slave owner did not pay Tommy and Luella a salary for their labor. Instead, he loaned them money to pay for land rents and farming implements that they were obligated to purchase from him. They were also required to sell their harvest to him at the price he determined. In slavery's new iteration, indebtedness replaced brute violence. Exploitation persisted. When sharecroppers could not escape debilitating cycles of debt, they were portrayed as stupid, lazy, and criminal. Their accumulated debts and abject poverty were depicted as a product of their moral shortcomings rather than the inherent unfairness of the sharecropping arrangements. The comments made by a distinguished colonel in 1871 well illustrate this point. Even these systems, the laborer receiving a portion of the crop, the colonel said, do not afford sufficient incentive to the Negroes to be industrious, and as a consequence, the result often proves unprofitable to the planter and to the laborer. He continued, the Negroes are, as a class, lazy and thriftless, working only when driven to it by necessity. This narrative of personal irresponsibility would play on repeat for generations to come, drowning out discussions about structural injustice. For blacks who challenged the legal, political, and social inequalities of the day, castigation was swift and savage. A common punishment was lynching, a form of public torture and murder often deployed when blacks dared to resist their subordinate station in society. Grandpa Brown drew his very first breath in a society where lynchings were rampant. Between 1880 and 1900, North Carolina recorded 58 lynching victims, 45 of whom were African American. North Carolina, however, was not alone. Throughout the nation, whites lynched nearly 800 blacks between 1900 and 1909, but only 95 whites in the same 10-year period. Racial violence upheld America's caste system. Even the President of the United States could not escape the racial caste system's entangling web. In 1901, the year Grandpa Brown was born, President Theodore Roosevelt invited a former slave, Booker T. Washington, to the White House for a meal to discuss the Republican Party's Southern strategy. This simple act, viewed as a seditious suggestion of social equality, provoked immediate Southern backlash. The Memphis Scimitar reported that when Roosevelt invited a nigger to dine with him at the White House, he committed the most damnable outrage which has ever been perpetrated by any citizen of the United States. The New Orleans Picayune wrote that the president was the worst enemy to his race of any white man who has ever occupied so high a place in this republic. The Macon Telegraph in Georgia asserted that God erected the barrier between the races, and no president of this or any country can break it down. Adding to the frenzy, Ben Tillman, a former governor of South Carolina, then serving as one of the state's U.S. senators, declared that the action of President Roosevelt in entertaining that nigger will necessitate our killing 1,000 niggers in the South before they will learn their place again. President Roosevelt had unintentionally fanned the flame of equality, and outraged Southern whites enthusiastically extinguished it. Racial subjugation was not, however, exclusively a Southern problem. No city in America went untouched by the racial caste system. Northern cities preferred to keep African Americans in their place by relying primarily, but not exclusively, on legal violence, such as racial covenants found in deeds, rather than lynchings in the public square.